right, we have Brother James Price from the Missionaries of God's Love. Good to see you. So we should begin by telling Jason and those who are watching from home, who are the Missionaries of God's Love?
The Missionaries of God's Love are an Australian-founded congregation. Founded in Canberra in 1986. And we exist to evangelize young people and the poor in the power of the Holy Spirit under the grace of what has come to be known as the charismatic renewal, which is the power of the Holy Spirit unleashed in a new way in the church in this age. So,
I was actually discerned the MGLs for a little bit and went.
You look good in brown and white, yeah.
Well, I went to the Come and See weekend, and I just love Father Ken and Father Ryan, and just good men.
Yes, I'm very grateful for the witness of those men, yeah.
Anyway, this is always awkward. I don't know how to say it, but what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, actually, I was here to talk about discerning God's will, and often you've actually quoted a contemporary of Father Ken's, the Canadian man, Father Bob Bedard.
That's right.
And he found,
Since discernment became fashionable, no one's made a decision since.
Yeah, and I mean, that was kind of my discerning motto. And I'd like sort of to crack that one open and just sort of talk about what are some of the pitfalls maybe that young people fall into in discerning, and why do we get stuck in these, in the state of perpetual discernment. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I jump right into is that one of the most overlooked and important aspects of discernment is action. Now, Is she the right one for me? I don't know. Should I ask her? Ask her out. Go on a date. You'll figure it out that way a heck of a lot faster than just by doing novena after novena. Because honestly, I think novenas are not a substitute for authentic discernment. It's often like, I want an answer in 9 days. And that's not how God works. And so novenas are a blessed gift for the church, but they're not a substitute for authentic discernment. And so what we've got to make sure is act, go, trust in God and walk, and he'll direct you. And if you feel like, well, I don't know what he wants, and it's almost like you have a seed in your hand. Is it an apple seed or is it an orange seed? Well, I don't know. I mean, it looks like an apple seed. It could be. Just put it in the ground. Water the thing, see what goes up, which means okay, well, I think maybe I might be called to religious life. Do a come and see weekend. Go check it out. Talk to some priests. How did you hear your vocation? And so I think action is one of the most important things, often overlooked. And then also, a priest friend of mine back in San Diego said the Holy Spirit speaks to you 100 times a day. How often are you listening? And if you get used to this habitual yes to the Holy Spirit, this docility to the Holy Spirit, with those very little yeses, the big yes of your vocation will fall naturally into place. And so just focus more on the little yeses than the big yeses, and then also look at, okay, what are the desires that I have? Because I always think of those as gifts from God, meaning I have this ache for the married life. I have this ache for the priesthood. Okay, well, what's the gift he gave you? And you might be like, well, my problem is I have an ache for both. I see the beauty of the priesthood. I see the beauty of the religious life. Which path should I do? I remember Mother Angelica walking with some seminarians once around that religious grounds, and she said, I just want to let you know that if you don't want to be a husband and a father, then we don't want you in the seminary. And I was like, well, wait, what? No, you're saying if we don't want that, then you don't want us? And she's like, exactly, because what kind of priest would you be if you didn't want to be a father and have that spousal love? And so a lot of times we think that the ache for the other vocation needs to completely evaporate before we enter into the religious life. I spoke with a priest a while back, and he was sharing with me that there was a phase in his priesthood where he mourned his fatherhood, the biological fatherhood, that he would never become an earthly father, and he wept over that. And to me, that isn't well, that's a sign that celibacy is unhealthy. No, that's a sign of a healthy priest, that he's able to process those emotions and meet Jesus Christ in that offering. Because if you're offering up something that's easy to give up for Lent, it's not much of an offering. You offer up something very difficult, that's a profound holocaust. And so I think it's important for people to know in the discernment process, a good Catholic is going to feel torn between these two things. They're going to realize the beauty of the religious vocation, realize the beauty of the married life. And so don't wait for one of those flames to completely blow out in order to take the other path. If you think, hey, maybe it's a religious life, and don't, in the meantime, last thing I'd say is don't guilt yourself into a false vocation. of thinking, well, I've heard that like if you're a guy and you pray that you should become a priest, but I don't really want one. I want to be a priest. But I feel like I'm giving God my sloppy seconds if I'm just, I'm getting married when he really wants me to be a priest. I remember Pope John the 23rd was friends with, I believe, an assistant or a bishop, and they were friends with a young man who's wavering between priesthood and the married life. And he ended up choosing the married life. And then word came back to the Pope through this assistant, and he said, oh, I bring some bad news. So-and-so fell for the trap, meaning he became married instead. And John the 23rd immediately corrected him, said, no, we don't have 6 sacraments and a trap. We have 7 sacraments.
Brother James, in a moment, I'd love to ask you how you made the decision to join the MGLs, but I'll say something shortly here. I think maybe sometimes, I wonder if the reason we over-spiritualize the discernment process is that we're looking for a degree of certainty that really isn't natural. And we think we have to have some sort of supernatural experience so that we can know beyond doubt that this is the path to take. I remember when I was discerning marriage with my wife, I had actually bought the ring in Australia, so here. I usually say Australia like it's on the other side of the world. Bought it here, moved to Texas, but I still wasn't sure if I should propose. And I was really worried. And I heard of a friend who prayed for 3 signs, and the signs were outrageous. And he got all of them. And it was like he wanted to see a full moon and a deer, and he was in the city, and like something else. And so I'm like, I am going to do that. So I prayed for 3 outrageous signs and got none of them. And I'm kneeling down after having received the Eucharist, and sometimes you imagine the Lord speaking to you. Well, my Lord sometimes speaks to me like a belligerent Aussie father. And Jesus said to me, well, you want to bloody marry her or not? And I said, yes. And he said, well, you're old enough and ugly enough to make this decision. And I went, righto. And if you don't mind, before I invite you, I want to share with those who hadn't heard this story. I shared it with the men the other night. I was really worried about proposing, and I called my good mate, Mark Bennett, who lives in Brisbane, Australia. Anyone know Mark? Wow, interesting. RCIA? I called Mark, and I remember I called him from my office, and this was the conversation. I said, hey, Mark, I love this girl. She's beautiful, obviously, and I just don't know. I'm having some doubts, and if this isn't the right decision, if I propose, it's like there's no turning back. And he just sort of cut me off. He said exactly this. What the bloody hell are you friggin' talking about, you idiot? Excuse me? She's better than you anyway. You need to propose before she figures that out. That night, I proposed to my wife. So, Brother James, how did you kind of overcome that and make the decision for the MGLs?
Yeah, well, for me, I know you guys have been talking a bit about it's not necessarily an out of the blue experience, but I was, a young fella, and I was dating a girl at the time, and I went on a retreat, and I was chatting to one of the brothers, and who was, from the MGLs, who's running the retreat, helping run it, and just he was talking about his experience of grieving over losing his father. I felt this clarity wash over me that my whole life made sense in light of the fact that I was meant to be a priest. And so I went forth from that into then I was going overseas for a year. And I was really keen on joining the brothers, but I just came to, again and again, I came face to face with my own wretchedness and my own sin, particularly my inchastity. That was big. And and just in the face of that struggle, I got to a point where I just felt like giving up, and I just made that up or something. But what the grace that broke through for me was that on the Feast of St. Matthew, I had this profound grace where I came to realize, chatting to my spiritual director, that just as Matthew was sitting in that tax collector's booth in his sin when Jesus walked past him and said, come follow me, and he got up and followed him, then the same way Jesus was looking at me and saying, come follow me. And, the least I could do was just, even if I didn't understand why, it didn't make sense, and every instinct in me wanted to run, I just, I could offer God a bit of courage. I felt I had that, and I got up and followed, and it's been the best thing I've ever done. Yeah.
I really want to encourage thank you. I really want to encourage the young men and the young women who are open to a vocation to please go and check out the MGLs. These guys are gold, and if you don't know much about them, please take the time to do it, because all of my experiences with your fantastic community have been so just beautiful. So
yeah, bless you, man. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really like to just take this, this final opportunity to, as a young man growing up, I was, it was a deep wound in my heart in the area of my sexuality, and I'm sure there's many other men in this room like that. And you guys are sort of the real two prophets for our generation. Matt, particularly on the porn front, and Jason more generally. And I was just so encouraged by. I remember I was meant to be studying for my HSC, and we were sitting in there watching the Jason Evert talk. My dad would walk in and be like, "What are you doing, son?" And I'm like, "Oh, nothing. It's a math test.
Just looking at porn."
It's not a chastity talk at all. Yeah. So and Matt, you really have preached a strong, consistent message on the porn front, and it's really blessed so many men. So thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, brother.
Appreciate you just bringing up the importance of purity at heart and discerning your vocation. I think it was Saint Alphonsus Liguori said that when a raven finds a dead body, the first thing it does, the first injury it inflicts, is it plucks out the eyes of the dead body. And he said, in the same respect, the first injury that impurity inflicts upon the soul is to take away the light of the things of God, which includes our vocation. And so as we grow in purity in heart, which is a battle, God gives us greater clarity of heart to see the plan he has for us. That's why I think the devil's so desperate to get our vision of God clouded through impurity, because then it's like I can't see the things of God. And so if you're struggling with your vocation, take a look at the chastity thing. How's it going? Are we making progress in that area? If not, find a good spiritual director. Find one confessor that you can stick with and keep going to make progress in that area. And it's not a promise that, hey, once you've gotten that stuff in the rearview mirror, your discernment is going to be clear. Understand that sometimes, as weird as this sounds, sometimes it's God's will for you not to know his will. And that stings sometimes, because it's like, well, God, no, like if I get really holy, then I'm going to know what's around the corner. But he says, no, just walk with me. Walk with me in this fog, because I'm not in tomorrow. I'm not in yesterday. The only place you find sanctity is in the present moment. And so just find peace in the fact that if he wanted you to know his will and you're living in grace, he would reveal it to you. And so just be patient for his timing with the revelation of the calling. As long as your heart is disposed towards him, you're living in the divine will.
Let's go.
Thank you, brother.